Maybe I'm gonna call and see if I can go there. I want to be like this matches in case I decide to change. I'll get this news in the hospital.
Yeah. Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. I'm going to talk a little bit about John Cena. This is the news that everybody is talking about in the world of professional wrestling, the retirement of John Cena. Unfortunately, I could not find a picture for the thumbnail of John Cena's final moments within the WWE, so I had to use this old photo. But a lot of people are upset because last Saturday night, on the 13th of December, John Anthony Felix Cena retired from professional wrestling after being in pro wrestling and in the WWE for 23 years. He ended a 23-year career. So people uh, of the Gen Z generation, Victoria and them, they grew up watching this guy, John Cena. You know, David, he gets on here sometimes. He talks about his memories of growing up as a young wrestling fan watching John Cena. Me personally, I did not. By the time John Cena came to the WWE in 2002, I was already 18 years old. Still a wrestling fan at 18, but not as big a wrestling fan at 18 like I was, obviously. Uh, obviously, like when I was 8 years old. When I was eight, my John Cena, my generation's John Cena was Hulk Hogan. You know what I mean? Even though I was not a big Hulk Hogan fan, you know what I mean? For the kids of my generation, our John Cena was Hulk Hogan. But this generation's Hulk Hogan was John Cena. You know, when I was introduced to John Cena in the early 2000s, when he first came out, obviously came out as the prototype. We all remember that angle with him and Kurt Angle, where Kurt Angle's calling out somebody that needs ruthless aggression. He comes out and he's like ruthless aggression, and then Stephanie McMahon discovers him rapping on the bus, on the tour bus in Europe, freestyle rapping. And eventually they decide to go with him as the white rapper gimmick, like a Vanilla Ice. They gave him two choices. You could either be like Vanilla Ice or you could be like Eminem, this white guy that raps. So after that, he would cut promos in a rapping style on his opponents. And a lot of the promos were funny, right? A lot of them were hilarious, you know? And he started to gain traction. And then by 2004, when I was at WrestleMania with my friend uh, in Madison Square Garden, John Cena won his first United States Championship against the Big Show at WrestleMania 20. Uh, the gimmick for him in 2003 was that he was going to supposed to rap against Fabulous and Jay Z, or Eminem and Jay Z, but Eminem and Jay Z and Fabulous and Jay Z both bailed. So on the pre-show of WrestleMania 19, they had him freestyle rapping against cardboard cutouts of these guys. But by the time you get to 2004, Cena was the most over guy in the company, and he was headed places. Fast forward a year later to WrestleMania 21 in Los Angeles. He wins his first WWE Championship against the longest running champion in SmackDown history, in JBL. He has a tremendous match with JBL at that year's Backlash, a bloodfest. Right, has a feud with Carlito, moving into uh, 2006, where he began his feud with Edge. At the very last pay per view of 2005, Edge cashes in his Money in the Bank and defeats John Cena, ending John Cena's reign. But in the middle of 2005, around the time of the summer when he had a feud with Jericho, fans really started to turn on John Cena. And by WrestleMania 22, in the match with Triple H for the WWE Championship, because Cena eventually regains the championship from Edge. In the match against Triple H at WrestleMania 22 in Chicago, fans start to turn on him, and the idea becomes that John Cena is a shitty wrestler. John Cena cannot wrestle. People are tired of the John Cena push, right? Especially the older fans, because it's 2006, and you know WWE's not gone completely PG yet, but they were getting there, right? And John Cena was typical of that. He was the first star of the first ever full length feature film that the WWE ever did in the Marine, and from there they started. Once he became champion, he started to tone down his rapper gimmick, and he became less edgy, right? So by 2006, fans started to turn on him. By 2007, he has the match with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 23 in Detroit. And this is the pay-per-view that Trump was at. The Shawn Michaels versus John Cena at WrestleMania 23 was the main event. And it was a spectacular match. They would go on to have one later on in the year in London on a Monday Night Raw that was even better. But these two had tremendous chemistry. But by this point, fans were really against John Cena. By the end of 2007, John Cena is forced to relinquish the championship because he's injured, and fans are actually happy. And I remember watching that the following year's Royal Rumble 2008. It was in Madison Square Garden. One of the Madison Square Garden events that I was not at when it came to me being a fan at this time. I was like 23, going on 24. Right, and I was one of those Cena haters. You know what I mean? I was one of those guys because I liked Cena in the beginning. I liked when he was the rapper gimmick. I liked when he came out with his CD. Right, You Can't See Me CD had a couple of bangers on there. Right, even though I know he didn't write it. But by 2007, he was completely this kind of cartoonish character, and I was starting to turn against him. But a lot of the fans there wanted to boo him, but he was coming back from the injury, and he won the Royal Rumble. He won his first Royal Rumble then. And he didn't go on to win the championship from Randy Orton, who was the champion at that time. This is when their feud was really heating up. The first time I remember them squaring off against each other was SummerSlam 2007. And they would become tied at the hip with each other for years, even though they never had a WrestleMania match ever. John Cena and Randy Orton. And then you have 2009. Randy Orton wins the Royal Rumble, goes on to face the champion Triple H at WrestleMania 25. But John Cena goes on to challenge his main rival Edge and the Big Show in a triple threat match that year. And by 2009, John Cena had some real steep competition in WWE because Jeff Hardy was becoming the most popular star of the company. But it wouldn't affect Cena. Cena would go on in 2010 to have a feud with the Nexus, and it's often said that he was the one that suggested that the Nexus not go over against Bret Hart, Chris Jericho, himself, and John Morrison and the WWE baby faces at SummerSlam 2010. And David Otunga, who was part of the Nexus at that time, talked about it on, I think it was Ariel Helwane's podcast or Busted Open. One of the wrestling podcasts that's out there talked about how John Cena was a bully in 2000 and in 2010. By 2011, John Cena would begin his feud with The Miz, and The Rock would return to basically give John Cena a hard time. This feud with The Rock and John Cena, this began in 2008. Because here's what happened. Here's the predicament that John Cena found himself in. In 2000 and between 2003 and 2004, all the stars that we had grown up and we had loved from the Attitude Era, for the most part, were gone. Kane was still there. The Big Show was still there. Triple H was still there. Mick Foley was gone and retired. The Undertaker was still there, but he was kind of a part timer. But the main guys, The Rock and the Stone Cold Steve Austin, um, they were no more, right? They were gone because Stone Cold Steve Austin retired at WrestleMania 19 because of the neck injury, and The Rock, he had one last WrestleMania appearance, a tag team match, himself and Mankind versus Evolution. Um, but after that, he was gone too. So Stone Cold Steve Austin was out with an injury. The Rock was out with going to Hollywood, and Brock Lesnar, a guy who would also come in from OVW at in 2002, was a guy they built up. You know, he won the Royal Rumble. Brock Lesnar in 2002, he won. King of the Ring. I mean, in 2003 he won the Royal Rumble. In 2002 he won King of the Ring. So they had really built him up. He beat Hulk Hogan. They had him set up to almost beat Stone Cold Steve Austin. He beat The Rock at SummerSlam. So he was doing really well, and they were pinning their future on him, right? He was supposed to be the successor to the guys from the Attitude Era. But what happens in 2004? He leaves, right? And he's going to the NFL, and then he would later show up in the UFC. So by the time you roll around to 2005 at WrestleMania 21, and we talk about this in the WrestleMania review series, um, there's nobody left. Everybody's gone. The Rock is gone. Stone Cold Steve Austin is gone. Brock Lesnar is gone. Everybody's gone, and there's nobody to really step up to the plate to take that spot for WWE. And John Cena becomes that guy. So in John Cena's mind, when it comes to The Rock, he was very resentful toward The Rock. He felt like The Rock was not paying homage to his wrestling side because John Cena felt like without wrestling, The Rock wouldn't be anything, right? That was The Rock's foot in the door. The WWE gave The Rock the chance in 1996 to come in, and they gave him that platform, and he became the megastar that he became. And he never was coming back. He even told people in Hollywood to stop referring to him as The Rock and just call him Dwayne Johnson, right? And he was just feel like he was ashamed of that. John Cena said he would never do that. He would never be ashamed of his WWE background, right? And he said it on talk shows, and The Rock took it a kind of a way. So in 2008, The Rock comes back to the WWE to induct his father and grandfather into the WWE Hall of Fame. Plus, it's in Miami. Well, it's in Tampa. It's the Citrus Bowl, WrestleMania 24, right? So, uh, they have verbal jazz back and forth, but everybody dreams of The Rock versus John Cena. So finally, WrestleMania 28, 2000, WrestleMania 27, they finally get The Rock to come back as the guest host of WrestleMania in Atlanta, right? But he's just going to be the guest host. He's not going to wrestle. The Miz, however, and John Cena are going to wrestle. And it's one of the worst WrestleMania matches ever. And The Miz goes over John Cena, thanks to help from The Rock. But they set it up in 2012, The Rock versus John Cena in Miami, Florida at WrestleMania 28. And it is a great match, guys. You know what I mean? Their first encounter, where John Cena lost and The Rock won. A lot of people that were fans of wrestling during the Attitude Era came back, and that kind of gave John Cena the rub of this outside celebrity. Because by the time The Rock comes back in 2012, he's an outside celebrity, right? He's a big megastar. So in the same way that Hulk Hogan came back in 2002 and gave The Rock the rub, is the same way now that The Rock is giving John Cena that sort of rub. And then finally, in 2013, The Rock and uh, John Cena wrestle again at WrestleMania 39 in New Jersey, which I was there for, right? And that one was really anticlimactic because in WrestleMania 29, it was after the pipe bomb. And John Cena was present for the pipe bomb. What the pipe bomb was CM Punk. CM Punk had been with WWE since 2007, since 2006, right? And he had the co-sign of Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman was going to build his ECW brand, a revived version of ECW, because after the success of One Night Stand '05 and One Night Stand '06, Vince McMahon saw that ECW still had a following, and John Cena was involved in One Night Stand '06. I was there um, at the Hammerstein Ballroom watching him wrestle, watching Rob Van Dam cashing his money in the bank on John Cena, and that all the ECW diehards hated John Cena, because he was everything that they were against, just like the Attitude Era fans. But Vince McMahon had saw that ECW was still profitable, so he was going to bring ECW back as a third brand alongside Raw and SmackDown. Now, eventually that didn't pan out because the WWE brass did not have faith in CM Punk. They had not seen anything that CM Punk had done in Ring of Honor. They had not heard about any of that. You know what I mean? The whole Summer of Punk thing or the feuds with Raven, like in his TNA days. You know what I mean? Like, Vince McMahon didn't pay any attention to that. But Paul Heyman wanted CM Punk to come out there and beat everybody. Beat Bobby Lashley, beat The Big Show, everybody that was in December to Dismember back then, right? And I think it was '06, right? So, and CM Punk won the Money in the Bank in 2008 at WrestleMania, won the Money in the Bank again in 2009 at WrestleMania. But he still was struggling. He had a straight edge society. And the Nexus at this time had split up into two. They were going to have their SmackDown faction called the Core, with like the likes of David Otunga and Wade Barrett and stuff. And they were going to have new guys that were coming in, like Kaval, like Husky Harris, who became Bray Wyatt, like Michael McGillicuddy, who became Curtis Axel. These new guys that they were calling up from Florida Championship Wrestling, right? As like a new version of Nexus led by a heel CM Punk. But that went nowhere, really. And what happens in 2011 is CM Punk cuts his pipe bomb, basically a work shoot promo, getting at Stephanie McMahon, getting at Triple H, getting at Vince McMahon, right? And the brass of WWE, the creative of WWE in 2011, because it was really stale. Like I said, WrestleMania that year, WrestleMania 27 was super lackluster. And the fact that The Rock was promised the main event a year in advance, he challenged John Cena. So it was a year of build. And The Rock doesn't actually come back until November of 2011 to wrestle The Miz and R-Truth, the Awesome Truth tag team. So CM Punk turns heel. And CM Punk threatens to leave the WWE and go back to Ring of Honor. And he brings up Paul Heyman, who is no longer with the company at this point. And it's like now they got to get the belt off. So they have a tremendous match at Money in the Bank that year. And that really starts off the CM Punk, John Cena rivalry, because other than Randy Orton, I would consider CM Punk his greatest rival. But so CM Punk was a megastar by 2000. By the time 2013 rolls around, and people are paying attention to CM Punk versus Undertaker, versus instead of John Cena versus The Rock at WrestleMania 29. Now, by the time we get to WrestleMania 30, in New Orleans, John Cena's one of John Cena's other greatest rivals, I consider to be Bray Wyatt, who had come into the company a year prior in 2013 with the Wyatt family. Wyndham Rotunda, IRS's son, and they have their first WrestleMania match. Not their most memorable. Their most memorable, obviously, is WrestleMania 20. WrestleMania 36 in 2020, where that was another example. When we get there, we'll talk about it. That was another example of how John Cena was a company guy. Um, by 2015, John Cena was starting to wind it down because he himself was getting into movies. He had done throughout the remainder of 2015 his USA Open Challenge, where he basically challenged all comers, including a returning Alberto Del Rio that year. And that was once they started to put the emphasis on Roman Reigns, like the Shield breaks up in 2014. Roman Reigns goes solo, and they start to put the emphasis on Roman Reigns and move the emphasis away from John Cena. So the heat that John Cena used to get, now Roman Reigns is getting from a lot of the smart marks. So by 2014, 2014-15, when Cena takes on Rusev, and when Rusev drives the tank in to WrestleMania at WrestleMania 31, John Cena is already a megastar, right? He's already accepted by the smart marks. He's becoming part of the establishment now. So 2016, he's not there. He's injured at WrestleMania 32. We talked about WrestleMania 32. Now, WrestleMania 32 had so many mishaps, so many injuries. Seth Rollins out with an injury. Sting was taken out, so Sting and Undertaker wasn't going to happen. Just a whole lot of stuff. Ronda Rousey, who they had booked a year in advance, was supposed to be Ronda Rousey and The Rock in a mixed tag match against Stephanie and Triple H. That doesn't happen because she's still with UFC, and Dana White will let her do it, and it just fell through. And John Cena was supposed to have a match against the members of the Wyatt family that year, but it ends up being a short little match between The Rock and Eric Rowan, with John Cena doing a run-in. And this was supposed to be their big WrestleMania in Dallas. That was supposed to break the record of WrestleMania 3, right? But it didn't go down like that. Cena wasn't really involved in that. Cena wasn't really involved in WrestleMania 33 either. But by the time we get around to WrestleMania 34, everybody always wanted to see Cena versus The Undertaker. Right? And that didn't happen until WrestleMania 34 in New Orleans. An impromptu match with Cena in the audience, featuring an Elias run-in by Elias, who was doing the singing gimmick at that time in 2018. But like I said, Cena was starting to wind it down. He wasn't there in New York at WrestleMania 35. He wasn't, and by the time we get to 2020, the pandemic happens. And Roman Reigns, who's their new biggest star, who's the guy they're really building up now, he's the new Cena, right? He's the new Super Cena. He becomes WWE champion at WrestleMania 32 for the second time, right after losing it at that year's Royal Rumble. But that was his big coronation, beating Triple H. So 10 years after Cena beat Triple H, Roman Reigns, who's like the new Cena, beats Triple H too, right? The only difference was Triple H came into WrestleMania 32 as champion. He did not go into WrestleMania 22 as champion against Cena. But Roman Reigns, because of his condition, was not able to be there. So what ends up happening is guys like John Cena and The Undertaker have to step in with these new type of cinematic matches. So Cena has one of the most unique matches in wrestling history. Is the Firefly Funhouse match with Bray Wyatt, who's now who since SummerSlam of 2019 was the Fiend, this new kind of demented Mister Rogers hybrid between Kane, Mankind, and the Undertaker type character. And John Cena is just doing all this stuff, and he talks about how he arrived at that. The creative process behind the Firefly Funhouse match was a really cool match. One of the highlights to me of WrestleMania 36, right? And then we don't see Cena for WrestleMania 37. We don't see him for 30. Uh, we don't see him for 38. We don't really see him again until WrestleMania 39, where he takes on and loses to Austin Theory. But in between that time, Roman Reigns at SummerSlam 2020 turned heel, attacking Braun Strowman and The Fiend, and he had turned heel. So the following SummerSlam 2021, John Cena comes back and he challenged. He had come back to pay-per-view before that, and it was the crowd erupted when John Cena returned in 2021 because fans' opinions had changed about John Cena over the years. And by the time he comes back to face Bloodline Roman Reigns and lose, fans loved his. Fans just loved him by then, right? But last year on the Raw Netflix, he announced his retirement tour after battling skin cancer. We talked about. If you guys go back to my review, the night after it happened, WrestleMania 39, the condition John Cena was in when he took on Austin Theory at WrestleMania 39, terrible. And I just wanted him to retire, then. But he announced his retirement on the Raw Netflix in the beginning of 2025. And this retirement tour under Triple H was terrible. I mean, terrible. He didn't win the Royal Rumble. He goes on to win Elimination Chamber in Canada, right? In Toronto. And he's involved with the storyline with Cody Rhodes and The Rock, because The Rock was a Bloodline member, but then at the Raw Netflix, he's cool with Cody Rhodes, who was still enemies with the Bloodline, right? And now Roman Reigns is a baby face, and there's two bloodlines with Roman Reigns and the Usos versus Solo Sikoa's bloodline. It got all convoluted. So one day The Rock just comes out and says, you know why on the Raw Netflix I was friends with Cody Rhodes? Because I want Cody Rhodes' soul, right? And they do this whole weird promo where The Rock asks for Cody Rhodes' soul. And like the idea was for Cody Rhodes, who was the WWE champion at the time, to turn heel, right? But at the last minute, Triple H and WWE Creative decide, hey, that guy John Cena who's on his retirement tour? Why don't we have him turn heel, right? And at Elimination Chamber, after he wins, he kicks Cody Rhodes in the balls after The Rock gives him this symbol, right? And Travis Scott is out there with The Rock. And all of a sudden, to the shock of many, something that we thought never would happen, and it never would have happened if Vince McMahon was there, John Cena turns heel. John Cena, he teased it a lot of times. He teased it in the WrestleMania, the Raw right after the WrestleMania in 2013. Remember the heel turn dance? We wanted to see it happen. And apparently he had the gear in place. So we're all thinking, oh man, we're all excited after Elimination Chamber. We covered it on the channel. What's John Cena going to do? What's he going to look like? And they're on the European tour. So we're tuning in like, to the Raw like in Belgium, right? And John Cena's cutting his heel promo. And, he tried. Remember, you deserve nothing. I'm not a face. I'm not a heel. I'm a human being, right? Remember that? And like John Cena really tried to make this heel turn work, leading up to the WrestleMania match against Cody Rhodes in 2025 at WrestleMania 41. He in Las Vegas. He really, really tried, but unfortunately, guys, it was poor timing. John Cena was retiring. He knew he only had a certain amount of dates, and they didn't change anything with his character. And The Rock decided he was not going to show up. And Travis Scott shows up in their match, WrestleMania Night 2, and he interferes on John Cena's behalf. Right? Cody has the chance to hit Cena with the belt. He doesn't. He drops it, and Cena wins it by hitting him with the belt, distracted by Travis Scott. Right? And this was a receipt for Travis Scott slapping Cody as hard as he could. Right? So, but then But then Travis Scott drops out. He's no longer part of the storyline. So for months and months, in matches with CM Punk at Money in the Bank, and matches with Randy Orton, a babyface Randy Orton at Backlash. Now, uh, now John Cena's a heel and Randy Orton's a babyface. Like I said, these guys were up and down the road together. They unified the old World Heavyweight Championship and the WWE Championship together. These two in 2013, right? So the like it was cool to kind of see that, but at the same, and it was in Randy's hometown in St. Louis, right? So it was cool to kind of see that, but at the same time, people just didn't want to boo John Cena in his retirement tour. So for several months, 5 months to be exact, 5 to 6 months, John Cena is a heel, right? But it's just not working out, at all. Because he's coming out and he's getting still cheered by the fans. And nothing is different. So WWE decides to abort this mission, abort this storyline, and abruptly, right before SummerSlam, right before the rematch, they decide to turn John Cena a babyface again. No explanation whatsoever. Just turning him a babyface, and Cody wins the belt back for the second time. Then, a guy who was John Cena's partner, Logan Paul. John Cena and Logan Paul had teamed up against R-Truth. Against Jey Uso and Cody Rhodes. R-Truth. Yeah, it was. And R-Truth had been involved in this storyline because he was always imitating John Cena, right? He was going around saying that John Cena was his childhood hero. And then when John Cena turned heel, he got disgruntled, and he had a match with John Cena at one of the Saturday Night's main events. He was Ron Cena, right? He was an imitation of John Cena. And all of a sudden, abruptly, he gets fired, right? And the fans take to the social media and they complain about they complain to the company, and then R-Truth comes back as Ron Killings, like his old militant character from the early 2000s in TNA. But then in the summer, when John Cena turns face again, out of nowhere, Ron Killings turns face again, and he's back to being R-Truth. So the whole storyline made no sense, and John Cena and Logan Paul, who were allies, are now enemies at Clash in Paris, right, in late August, right after SummerSlam, right after Cena drops the belt to Cody Rhodes. And then it's like, okay, where are we going with, like, this shit makes no sense, like, at all. And then WrestlePalooza, WWE's first event on ESPN. They leave Peacock and they sign a multi-million-dollar deal with Disney and ESPN, right? Who comes back at SummerSlam to confront John Cena right after he lost? Brock Lesnar, somebody that, because of the Vince McMahon stuff with Janelle Grant, we thought we would never see again, right? Because he was named in the lawsuit, right? But he comes back, and then it annihilates John Cena. Like John Cena's retirement tour, and he gets annihilated by Brock Lesnar. What sense does it make? And then Cena plays no part in War Games, but instead has a feud with Dominic Mysterio, who he loses to. And then we get to his retirement match. They have a tournament to see who will be the last person to face John Cena ever. And who wins it but Gunther. And that's it. Gunther. And then Gunther chokes John Cena out. So John Cena, the guy who said he would never give up, the guy who was the first recipient, really, of Suplex City at SummerSlam 2014 against Lesnar, right? That guy. The guy who never gave up in his whole career, that was his motto, never give up. He taps out. He just taps out like that. Right? Like, what kind of fucking abortion what were we looking at? And then it's not like, see, wrestling is so different now. Wrestling is so much more meta. In the old days, the heat would have been on Gunther. And I think that's what the company wants. They want the heat to be on Gunther. Because on Monday Night Raw, like, people were confronting, Adam Pearce was confronting him, R-Truth was confronting him. Like, they were trying to make Gunther out to be the biggest heel in the company, right? But the heat is not on Gunther, though, guys. The heat is on the company. The heat is on Triple H. The heat is on the booking. Because people know that wrestling is a work. They know how wrestling works. So they're like, what the fuck, Triple H? You know, like what was that? You know what I mean? Was it a decent match? Yeah, but did Gunther need it? No, because Gunther's already fucking over, right? He's already over. As soon as they announced the tournament, everybody was saying that Gunther was going to be the opponent, and I'm like, no, Carmelo Hayes or somebody else, could have had that spot. And it's like, okay, Gunther has 2 retirements of 2 wrestling legends under his belt now. He has, in 1 year, in 1 calendar year, he has fucking Goldberg and John Cena. Like, how much more over can this guy be? You know what I mean? This is Triple H. He's trying to make Gunther into his Brock Lesnar, right? Into his version of Brock Lesnar. Which, again, makes no sense because at WrestleMania, he had the motherfucker tap out to Jey Uso. Like, the booking in WWE is totally all over the place, and the Cena Retirement Tour proved it. And this was just the shit cherry on top of basically what this was. And everybody said, oh, well, it's the time-honored tradition that when a guy goes out, he loses. No, not necessarily. Not in a retirement match. I mean, they'll say, oh, well, Ric Flair lost his retirement match to Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels lost his retirement match to Undertaker. Did Undertaker or Shawn Michaels need it? No, but Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, but Undertaker won his retirement match. Undertaker's last match was the Boneyard match against AJ Styles at WrestleMania 36. So why was Undertaker given that respect and not John Cena? Did Gunther really need a win over John Cena? No. Right? Because this is another example of fucking WrestleMania 30. Brock Lesnar versus Undertaker. Did Brock Lesnar need the streak? No. Brock Lesnar did not need to beat The Undertaker, just as Gunther did not need to beat John Cena. Like, why Gunther number one? And not only that, why Gunther, but why have him tap out? Why tap out? The guy built his whole career around never giving up. And that's how you have him lose. He gives up. So you mean to tell me within 1 calendar year, the guy who was the ultimate babyface of the 2000s and the 2010s, the Hulk Hogan for this generation, just like Hulk Hogan spanned 2 decades, 80s and 90s, John Cena spanned 2 decades, 90s and 2000s and 2010s. You mean to tell me the people like Victoria, my daughter, the people like the kids of this generation, Gen Z Hulk Hogan, he gives up? His motto was never give up. That's why kids loved him. But his last match, he gives up, right? So he could withstand everything, but he couldn't withstand Gunther choking him out. If you wanted to have him lose by submission, the way to do this was take it all the way back to WrestleMania 13, take it all the way back to Stone Cold Steve Austin's versus Bret the Hitman Hart, and just have him pass out. You know what I mean? Don't have him tap. Come on, man. And you can see the reaction of Triple H. You can see the reaction against Triple H. There is a revolt now against Triple H between the abortion that was WrestleMania 42 and the abortion that was the Cena heel turn, and then winning the Intercontinental Championship just for a cheap pop in Boston, ruining Dominic Mysterio's push, and Cena was out the door anyway, right? To this. You know what I mean? What the fuck was this? You know what I mean? Is this going to benefit Gunther in any way? Is Gunther going to be the 2026 Royal Rumble winner? He better be. He better be with the momentum that he's coming in with. The only part of the John Cena retirement that I enjoyed was when Cody Rhodes and CM Punk came out and presented John Cena with the World Heavyweight Championship and the WWE Championship, respectively. That's the only part I really liked of this. The shoes taking off part, that was stupid. Like, it was cool when Undertaker did it in 2017 when it started at WrestleMania 33. I was up for that. I was so tired that night when we finally got around to Roman Reigns versus Undertaker, right? But, like, that was okay. When Triple H did it at WrestleMania 38 in 2022 in the beginning, like, because Triple H had the heart attack, so he had to retire, forced to retire. Like, that was cool. But the clothes were already in the ring. You didn't see fucking Undertaker or Triple H stripping in the middle of the ring. John Cena, when he was stripping his clothes off. I mean, come on. The guy deserved better, right? He deserved better. Just like Goldberg, when they cut Goldberg's speech short when he retired, right? I think it was like back in April, right? He retired. You know what I mean? So I didn't like it. I didn't care for it. I thought the legend was disrespected. People gonna disagree with me. People gonna say, well, you know, he was doing the honors. He was putting Gunther over. The company wants to get behind Gunther. But I bet if we find out later, just like we found out with the heel turn, that he wasn't really for it, right? That it was pushed on him by the shitty creative that is Triple H. Triple H is a facade. The Triple H that we saw in the golden years of NXT, black and gold NXT, like 2014, 2015, is no more, guys. That's over with, right? The honeymoon is over with Triple H. You know what I mean? After the Bloodline storyline, he had nothing else. He definitely didn't know how to handle John Cena. Who knows? Maybe he didn't even like John Cena. I don't know. But the way that John Cena went out, totally unacceptable. But anyway, thank you, John Cena, for the memories. Thank you for, even though I hated you for most of your career, my nickname for you, because they used to call you Big Match John. My nickname for you was Ugly Man John, Ugly Boy John, was the inspiration for my first video channel way back in 2015. And one of my first videos that I made, besides me talking about the WWE Hall of Fame and my experience with the initial class of 2004, my second video on my other channel was why John Cena is overrated. And I mentioned then that John Cena was the top star longer than Stone Cold Steve Austin, longer than Hulk Hogan, only guys that could really even Bob Backlund. Only guys that could really top him was Bruno Sammartino as the top face of WWE. And that was 10 years. That was from 2005 to 2015. We're in 2025 now. That was 10 years ago that I made that video, right? And John Cena, fans look at John Cena, including me, in a totally different light, as he's been the ambassador of the company for years upon years, since like really becoming a part-timer in the latter half of the 20 minutes. But thank you for the memories, John Cena, and I wish you well in your future endeavors. Peace, guys. Thank you, Aaron, for contributing. The Unseen 17, John Cena in 2025 broke Ric Flair's record. Yeah, they did. They did, Aaron. But it's crazy when you look at the metamorphosis. John Cena is the wrestling version of the Star Wars prequels. He's the wrestling version of the Star Wars prequels because we hated him but now we love him. With time, he's become fans' perceptions of him has changed, and it's crazy to see. It is crazy to see. Sometimes when somebody's in the public eye for very long, you start to see how the perception of them will change. You know what I mean? I I noticed this with, like I said, the Star Wars prequels. When the Star Wars prequels first came out, uh, 1999, 2002, and 2005, respectively, fans hated them. Fans hated them for over a decade. But over time, as people grew up with them, they became more acceptable. John Cena was the same way. You know what I mean? When I first started my first video channel, my original video channel, like I said, my old video channel from 2015, I was that was my thing, ranting against John Cena, uh, being upset that he was being shoved down our throat. I feel like he beat everybody. He even beat Brock Lesnar when Brock Lesnar came back in 2012. Brock Lesnar's first match back at Extreme Rules 2012 was against John Cena when he broke John Cena's nose and John Cena won. You know what I mean? So our opinions changed over the years from liking John Cena to loving John Cena to hating John Cena back to loving him again. All within the course of one company. Because when he came into the business, things were different. There wasn't WCW or ECW anymore. There wasn't a bunch of territories. So it wasn't like Hulk Hogan or Macho Man or Bret Hart or Shawn Michaels, where they went other places. He just went there. He was synonymous with the WWE and he carried it on his back at a time when it was very difficult to carry it on his back. So much like, but see, Vince McMahon stood the course with it. During Vince McMahon's tenure in WWE, he had two dark periods. He had the dark period between 1993 and 1996 when things were bad for the company, and there he kept switching guys. He ran with Lex Luger for a while. He ran with Diesel for a while. He ran with Bret Hart for a while. You know what I mean? He didn't have a steady guy that he was really pushing as the face of the company in the 90s when he had his dark period. But in the 2010s when he had his dark period, he continued to run with John Cena. So the period from uh, 20, 2010 to about 2015, he continued to run with John Cena in the same way, like around 2019, 2018, 19, like when AEW first emerged. That was his third dark period, and he stood the course with Roman Reigns, even though people thought he would pull a Diesel with Roman Reigns, but he didn't. You know what I'm saying? So Vince really thought highly of John Cena in the same way he thought of Roman Reigns, in the way he didn't really about Lex Luger, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, or Diesel. You know what I mean? Despite what Bret Hart says about the relationship between Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon, I don't believe that. I think that's just I mean, now Bret Hart is like the wrestling version of Candace Owens. Now he's just coming up with like now you've, as the British would say, you've completely lost the plot, Bret. You know what I mean? But next he's gonna say that he was sleeping with John Cena. You know what I mean? But anyway, thank you, John Cena, for the memories. My favorite John Cena match is the feud with JBL, probably the first one. Uh, Aaron brings up a tremendous point. So Vince McMahon didn't even bother to be at John Cena's last match, and they moved his last match in the DC and hoped the president would be there. He never bothered to show up. Well, yeah, um, there were rumors that Trump was going to be there, but I think um, a lot happened, over the course of those couple of days. Aaron, I'm not sure if the Bundy Beach incident was before John Cena's last match or wait. Oh no, no, no. It, the beach incident, the Bundy Beach incident, was before. Yeah, before. Okay, so yeah, Trump had no excuse. He should have been there. uh, because that was Sunday. His match was Saturday. You know what I mean? So um, yeah, Trump really had no excuse. I think he was too busy taking out ships in the Caribbean, Venezuelan ships in the Caribbean Sea, trying to start conflicts with Venezuela. But you know, I didn't know they moved it to D.C. for that reason. You know what I mean? That's crazy. But he wasn't there. Neither was Vince. I don't think that if Vince was there, they wouldn't have showed it. Um, One person that I wish was there, RIP, was Bray Wyatt, because Bray Wyatt passed away in 2023. Uh, to me, I associate him with John Cena as well. Later John Cena. Yeah, and your favorite match was with Booker T. Okay, which match with Booker T though? That would have been cool to see Trump there. You know what I mean? I don't really associate John Cena with Trump necessarily. You know, like if it was Bobby Lashley's last match, I'd be disappointed if Trump wasn't there. You know what I mean? Because but it would have been cool to see. But I don't understand why he couldn't get a WrestleMania. You know what I mean? Like it, a Saturday night's main event send off. Come on. I mean, I know it's like you know it should have been a WrestleMania send off. They should have like scheduled it different. But he didn't have that many dates. But I'm just saying, like, wouldn't it have been better? But do you guys think this is really it? You know what I mean? Like wrestlers always. Is this really it? Wrestlers always say this is it. Look at Ric Flair. Ric Flair had in 2008. Ric Flair had one of the most amazing send-offs ever. And he fucking shows up in TNA wrestling like what 2 years later, practically. And like Mick Foley, Royal Rumble 2000. Okay, he loses to Triple H. We think that's it. A couple months later, WrestleMania 2000, he's right there wrestling in the Fatal 4 match. So retirements are never permanent. Even Shawn Michaels is. Shawn Michaels said he wanted to honor Undertaker. He retires at WrestleMania 26. He doesn't come back, but for years and years, for 8 years, and then finally comes back at the Saudi show. So we know WrestleMania is going to be in Saudi Arabia. But me, I think this is it for John Cena. I think he's going to honor it, and he won't be back ever. But he will still be with the company as an ambassador. You know, I feel like he deserves so much better. And I feel like he's on the Mount Rushmore of WWE guys, definitely. Him, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bruno Sammartino, and Hulk Hogan. You know what I mean? Uh, that would be my Mount Rushmore of WWE. Those are the guys that they carried eras. You know what I mean? They had their seconds. You know what I mean? Like they had their guys like Cena. His second guy during his first half of his run was Batista. That was his number two. And then the later half of his run was him and Randy Orton. After Batista left from 2010 onward. You know what I mean? Like Roman Reigns' second guy is the number two is Seth Rollins. You know, Cody Rhodes is we don't know who that is yet. Cody Rhodes is the leader of WWE right now, but we don't know who will step up and be that second tier, because there's always a second tier guy. You know what I mean? Bruno Sammartino and Paige Morales, Hulk Hogan and Macho Man, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, John Cena and Batista the first half, and John Cena and Randy Orton the second half, Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. We don't know who Cody Rhodes' guy is going to be. There's always that guy that person is synonymous with. They have battles and battles for years and years. Randy Orton was that for Cena, right? Rollins is that for Reigns. Macho Man was that for Hogan. And Pedro and Bruno never had back-to-back great matches and rivalries with each other. But 1972 Shea Stadium, the first 73 Shea could be 73 in Shea Stadium, WWE's first mega super show prior to WrestleMania. Years before the first WrestleMania was Bruno Sammartino versus Pedro. Right? Aaron's saying Austin Theory is going to be that guy. Could be. As it stands right now, even though Cody's run just basically started, but Austin Theory could be that guy. As it stands right now, though, I would say AJ Styles and Cody, but AJ Styles can't be that guy because he's on his way out too. That's the next retirement tour, is AJ Styles. A lot of people are talking about AJ Styles and his exit, from WWE and from wrestling in general. But Austin Theory could be that guy. I mean, hey, he's the masked man. Him and Cody, maybe Jey Uso doesn't have the skills. Jey Uso is that warrior slot. That warrior slot is like the number 3 guy, the number 3 baby face. In John Cena's era, it was actually CM Punk for a while. You know what I mean? Like, they're kind of there. They have a following, but they don't have. They're not number 1 and number 2. They're the number 3. Ultimate Warrior was that. The Hogan era, it was Ultimate Warrior. The New Generation era, it was Razor Ramon or Diesel sometimes. The Attitude Era, it was either Mick Foley. It was a lot of times it was Mick Foley. Sometimes it was Triple H. You know what I mean? Like, and John Cena's era his later era had CM Punk. His first era, the first half of his run was kind of Edge, and that's the guy I wish was here. Obviously, he couldn't have been because, but one thing, Aaron, I know Aaron's an AEW fan. One thing Aaron will agree with me on is AEW handled Sting's retirement way better than WWE handled John Cena's retirement. Sting was treated, and we talked about Sting's retirement on this channel when it happened, right? We talked about it. Sting was treated in AEW with dignity, respect, and he had an undefeated streak, right? Him and Darby Allin wrestled, and he didn't have to put anybody over. He didn't have to do that bullshit. Did he put over the Young Bucks? No, he didn't. Right? He went out undefeated for basically 5 years that he was in the company as an active participant. Right? And he wouldn't even have the history with AEW that John Cena had with WWE. Yeah, most people view AEW as an extension of WCW. I do. Because they're on the same network. They're on the Turner station. So you could make the argument, theoretically, that Sting carried, wrestling on the Turner station in WCW. But in reality, AEW's history only goes back to 2019. You know what I mean? So Sting was only there for like 5 years, but they handled him way better than what WWE did for John Cena. You don't have to put somebody over when you're out the door. That's bullshit. That is for when you're leaving to another company, not when you're retiring. When you're leaving to another company, that's the tradition. People point to that interview after Survivor Series, uh, 1997, that Vince McMahon said, a time-honored tradition where he talked about Bret Hart, because Bret Hart was leaving to WCW. John Cena's not leaving anywhere, right? John Cena's not going to AEW. Like the point of putting somebody over when you leave is so that when you go to another wrestling promotion, won't look stronger in that other wrestling promotion, and hurt your former wrestling promotion. But John Cena's not going anywhere. He's retiring. So let's just talk about a tradition. That's not necessary. You know what I mean? Tony Khan didn't do it with Sting. It wasn't done with Undertaker in WWE. He won his final match against AJ Styles, the Boneyard match. Sting won his final match. That's not a thing. You know what I'm saying? This tradition doesn't exist only like when you leave to go to another company, not when you leave to retire. No. Vern Gagne, like he had his last match like in the 80s. Did he put anybody over? Now you'll say, oh, he's the owner of AWA. Of course he didn't. But the point is, you don't have to put somebody over. And if you're gonna do that, if you're gonna run with that, make it somebody. And also, you guys don't understand. Putting somebody over, losing to somebody is not the same thing again as putting somebody over. You could argue that Sting put the Young Bucks over, and he put over Darby Allin by being associated with them, by giving them the rub of a legend. You don't have to beat that person. Right. Aaron is right. You're talking about, Aaron, fans are jumping on me. I'm putting this out there. Aaron is correct. He's reiterating the same thing I just said. Fans were jumping on me on message boards and Facebook groups talking about, I don't know what I'm talking about. It's a time-honored tradition that when wrestlers leave, they put over the newer talent. No, that's not a time-honored tradition. You're talking out your ass. You don't know what you're talking about. Aaron is right. I'm right. You guys don't know what the hell you're talking about. This is when smart marks become dumbasses tradition. Because you're taking something that you heard somebody in the business say, and you're twisting it to mean something that it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean what you guys are talking about. It means what Aaron and I are talking about. You're twisting it. When a guy goes from one promotion to another, he puts over the talent that's staying. Not when a guy retires. That's not. You get to choose. And you're like you're saying, you go out as a winner. That's not the same thing you guys are talking about. And even if it were, what good does a win over John Cena do for Gunther? He was already world heavyweight champion. He's already a main eventer. Like he's set already. Gunther is the top heel in WWE right now. You know what I mean? You guys do realize that. And the John Cena victory did nothing for him. It was completely worthless. They could have did it what they did with Dominic Mysterio. That would have helped Dominic. If you're going to have Cena lose, the way that he did it with Dominic Mysterio by cheating and Liv Morgan interfering, that's a better way. If you're going to do it that way, I wouldn't have him lose at all. I would have him go out as a winner like Sting did. But if you're going to have him do it in any way, have him do it in a convoluted way. Protect him. You know what I mean? For example, I'll give you an example. Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan. Now their names will always be linked together. Not only because Hulk Hogan, uh, John Cena was the Hulk Hogan of the new generation. I mean, not the new generation, but the modern generation. Put it that way. But also because Hulk Hogan died the same year John Cena retired. So basically, the wrestling world said goodbye to both of them in different capacities. But take, for example, Hulk Hogan. When he was, and he wasn't retiring, but WWE thought he was. You know what I mean? When he left WWE in 1993, the way they had him go out was by Yokozuna cheating. And this was Yokozuna. Yokozuna was in a position at the same time in 1993 that Gunther is now as the top heel of the company. But they still didn't have him demolished Hulk Hogan cleanly. You know what I mean? They had some kind of convoluted finish to protect Hulk. And they thought Hulk was retiring back then in 93. You know what I mean? Because he had told Vince he was going to go out and do movies. You know, Thunder in Paradise. So it was the same thing. But they still didn't have, they protected Hulk. Hulk didn't win, but they still protected him. You know what I mean? And they could have done that with John Cena, some kind of convoluted win, some kind of cheating thing like they did with when he lost the Intercontinental Championship to Dominic, the same way. If they were going to do it, I would have had him go out on top. But if they were going to do it that way, have him do it some kind of fuck finish, you know, with somebody that really could have used the rub. And if you're going to do the Monster Annihilation finish, why not do it with Braun Breaker? You're trying to push Braun Breaker into the main event anyway. He has the match coming up on the 5th with CM Punk in the Barclays, in Brooklyn. So why not do it with him? You know what I'm saying? Do a whole like Hulk Hogan, Brock Lesnar circa 2002 type annihilation with Cena. Gunther didn't need it. You know what I mean? He was already over. You know what I mean? Gunther's had a hell of a year, despite the way he lost the championship at WrestleMania. He's had a hell of a year. You know what I mean? Like, he's had the most amazing year I've ever seen from any wrestler, to be honest with you guys. But I didn't like it. I thought it was bullshit. I thought John Cena deserved better. Peace, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Aaron is correct, man. It's John Cena retirement. Man, this guy been disrespected by Triple H the entire year. This was the shit cherry on top of the shit sundae. A piece of rubbish. You know what I mean? This whole final run of John Cena. This is how you treat the man that was with your company carrying on his back for 20 years. This is how you treat this guy. You know what I mean? This is how he goes out. This whole year has been nothing but disrespect to this legend. And we might have started out hating him, but many fans have grown up with him. And this was terrible. This was a disrespect to him. You know what I mean? Peace.